So let's talk about how to enable mobile applications to access the endpoint functions that you've defined in your Conference Central application. So here's the Android app that we have that will access the Conference Central app running on Udacity. So you've already learned about setting the client IDs to specify the clients that are allowed to access your backend API. Well, to allow a mobile application to access the backend API, you have to add the client ID for your mobile app as well. So here we're looking at the @API definition, @API definition in the Conference API class. And here we've specified the client IDs. We've got the web client ID. And then here you see we've specified the Android client ID. And if we had an iOS ID, we would specify that here as well. We have the API Explorer client ID. And we've been using the constants.java class to hold our client IDs as well as other constants. So this is my client ID, my web client ID. And then here is where I would put the Android client ID when I have it. So one other thing that you need to set for Android apps is you need to specify the Android audience. So the client IDs list protects the backend API from unauthorized clients. But further protection is needed to protect the clients so that their auth token will work only for the intended backend API. And for Android clients, we use the audiences attribute to specify which backend APIs they can connect to. So the value of the audiences attribute needs to be the web client ID of the apps that the Android app will connect to. So looking again at constants.java, so in this case, we set the Android audience to be the web client ID of this Conference Central application. So when you create your Android client ID, you're going to need to know a couple of things. You're going to need to know the package name of the classes in your Android application, and you're also going to need to have the SHA-1 fingerprint of your application. When you build your Android app in debug mode, the SDK automatically creates the debug key and signs the application with it. You can also generate a new key. To do this, you'll need to specify the key store name and the key store alias. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a new key. So I call the key tool passing -gen key, and then I specify the key store name, which I've very cunningly called key store-name.keystore. I need to specify an alias for the key store, which I've cunningly named key store-alias. Then I'm going to need to enter a password, and you can pick whatever password you want. Just remember it. Then it's going to ask some questions. Go ahead and answer the questions. Then at the end, make sure you say yes to actually go ahead and do it. And then it's going to ask you to enter the password for the key store alias. And if you want to use the same password as you just entered before, then just press return. Now I've created my new key. To create the Android client ID, I'm actually going to need the SHA-1 fingerprint of the new key. And to get that, again, you call key tool, you specify the -export cert. You need to provide the alias. In my case, it was just key store alias, and the key store name, and in my case, it was just key store-name.keystore. So now I need to enter the password, and you see here it gives a certificate fingerprint, and here is actually the SHA-1 value. So I'm going to need to copy this whole thing here. You don't include the SHA-1 colon, but you include all the value of the SHA-1. You're going to need to copy that. You'll need that when you create your Android client ID. Okay, so now I'm going to create my Android client ID. And just as you did with your client ID for web application, you create your Android client ID in the developers console over at console.developers.google.com. So to do that, you choose the credentials screen under APIs and auth, choose create new client ID. And then this time, make sure you choose installed application, select Android. Then you're going to need to provide the package name. And this is the package name of the classes in your Android app. And in our case, the package is com.google.devrel.training.conference.android. Going to need to copy over the SHA-1 fingerprint. Hope I got that right. You can leave deep linking disabled and you create your client ID. Okay, now you see I have both the client ID for a web application and the client ID for the Android application. And I'm going to need to take this client ID here and copy it. And over here in my source code, I need to enter the Android client ID. So one more thing you're going to need to do is to generate the client library containing your endpoints API. Once you've got the client library, your mobile app will be able to include it so that it can make calls to the endpoints API. For Android apps, generating the client library is very straightforward. In the terminal window, go to the directory containing your project's pom.xml file. Here's my pom.xml. Then you need to run the command to get the client live. mvn appengine : endpoint _ get _ client _ live. Now the process runs. Okay, build success. Always like the sound of that. Now whenever you do a build, the results go into a target directory. So here's our target directory. Let's go into it. And here you see the endpoints - client - lives. So go into endpoints - client - lives, and you'll see a folder with the name of your project. Go into that folder. Now go ahead and invoke Maven to build the client library. This is very simple. You just do mvn install. Now it's building. Now it's done. This builds the required class files, and it creates the jar files that you're going to need to add to your client project. So now we're done, and we've got the target folder. And you see in the target folder, we have this snapshot jar. So this is the name of the project. This is the version, snapshot.jar. This is the client library jar. You'll need to add this client library jar to your Android app. The process of adding the client library jar to your Android app, and also of how to call the endpoints API inside your Android client, is very well documented in the developer docs. So we have explained how to generate the client library. Actually, we already did that. So the docs explain how to add the client library to the project. There's a couple other things you need to do. You need to create a service object. And then there's a discussion of how to call the backend API. And as well as the information in the developer docs, so we've written a document that takes you through the steps that you're going to need to do to get an Android application to use the Conference Central Endpoints API. You'll also need to remember that if you do change your backend API, you're going to have to regenerate your client libraries and re-add them to your clients. You can also access your backend API from iOS apps, but since these don't use Java, the process to generate the client library is slightly different, and it's well documented in the developer docs as well. So you can read about it in the developer documentation. Now that you've got the client library for your mobile device, it's up to you how you use the Conference API in your mobile app. So the Android app that comes with this course, the Udacity Conference Central app, and you can get it from Play Store, is very simple, and it's really only meant to be a demo, so it's not fully functional. Basically, all it will do is it will query for the conferences, it will let you register, and it'll let you unregister, but it doesn't do very much else. Feel free to get the source code for the Android app and to hook it up to work with your own Conference Central application. You may need to make some small changes to your backend API code, so be sure to check the instructor notes for this video. These changes will make your backend API code more robust for all client apps, so it will continue to work with your web UI clients as well as with Android apps. So also feel free to extend the source code for the Android app to call more of the backend API as you like.